The Monster Hunter Rise demo has been out for a little while. We've been able to play with motion controls this entire time. So why haven't I been talking about it? Well, we're in lockdown right now. My family's home and they need me, so I've been a little bit busy. But that has given me a decent amount of time to actually put some thoughts together and really kind of understand what I want to say about the motion controls. I'm pretty happy about that. Motion controls in Monster Hunter Rise are nearly the best implementation of motion controls on the entire platform, including Splatoon 2. But unfortunately, there's two major issues and, well, a missing option that I'd like to see. And if they can get those fixed, they will be the best implementation of motion controls on the Nintendo Switch. Let's talk about it.
Dumo plays.
Okay, so to start, the missing option, when we're going through these camera controls, there isn't actually one to allow your right stick to be inverted without inverting your gyroscope, which is basically just the issue that people have been talking about online, and it's an option with so many great options in the game. I feel like it's almost a glaring omission, and I would really like to see them just add the option, if at all possible. Now, let's talk about some of the bigger problems. This is going to be a little bit awkward for me, but I'm going to have to stand up so you guys can see my controller. I have to go over a little bit of baseline stuff just so that you guys have an understanding of what's going on so you can understand the issues. So, for starters, let's turn back on the right stick. So when we're using the right stick, when we go up, you only go up so high. There's a ceiling. You can't go past it. When you go down, there's a floor, and you can't go past that. Of course, when you're turning side to side, you can turn the entire way. That's perfectly normal, and that makes sense. So, it just makes sense that when you do your gyroscope, you have the same floor and ceiling. Now, the only difference is that when we go, we've now hit the ceiling. I will continue to rotate my controller up, and nothing else happens. This makes sense. This is completely normal. When I start coming down, the camera is going to start moving immediately down, which means that when my hands are back to my starting position, I'm staring at the ground. Again, perfectly normal. The same thing with the ground. When I look all the way down, I hit the floor. If I keep turning, nothing happens, but it immediately starts coming back so that when I'm level, I'm staring up. Again, perfectly normal. This is how it's supposed to work. And of course, side to side makes absolutely no difference because obviously you can spin. Same with the right stick. Now, what we have to do whenever we break the ceiling and we're staring at the ground is we have to retarget. L retargets. This is completely normal. Again, in Splatoon, it's the Y button resets your camera. In Monster Hunter, your target of your monster resets. This works perfectly fine. As you get better with motion controls, you hit the floor and ceiling less, which means that you require less resets. As you can see, it's fairly forgiving. There's really no reason to go too much further than the floor and the ceiling, but every once in a while, you're going to have to reset. It is what it is. That's completely normal with motion controls. And as you're learning, you reset less, so you get feedback as to whether or not you're improving. The less resets you need, the more obviously that you understand that the controls are working properly and you're understanding them. Every time you need a reset like this, that's human error. You messed up. That was your mistake, generally speaking, and not the game's. So the issue in Monster Hunter with a reset, which again is going to be needed, is that, say, my gyro is looking at the ground. So in order to look up, I now have to hold my controller at a weird angle. Eventually, I'm going to want to reset, which means I have to force my face to the ground and then hit the reset. It's jarring and a little bit inconvenient, but not the end of the world, as long as I'm not doing it too often. Another way that could be done would be with the right stick, but since I have mine deactivated, which is actually the standard when you turn on the motion controls in Monster Hunter Rise, it would seem to me that that's how they would intend the motion controls to work is without the right stick. There's a lot of advantages to this, mainly that you don't mess up your Y-axis as you're moving from side to side. It also allows you to go up and just move slowly. You just have a little bit more control. It's not something I normally use because if I'm swinging, if I want to go slowly, I'll just move my motion controls. And if I want to go quickly, I'll swing all the way around. Or if I want to go really quickly, I'll do both. So that brings us to issue number 1. Some of the moves in Monster Hunter Rise leaves your camera looking towards the ground. Wirefalls, for starters, drags your camera down a little ways. Some of the Silkbind moves, again, leave you looking at the ground. I even watched a hunting horn speedrun of someone who wasn't using motion controls, where after a magnificent trio, they were looking at the ground and needed to adjust up with the right stick. Probably not something that would be overly noticeable for a sticks player, but as a motion player, it's jarring and it's a sign that we've messed up. The next issue is that the gyro actually has a downward drift when you're shooting often. It's not something that comes up every time, and it only seems to usually kick in after I've done a couple hunts, but eventually I'll start with my controller parallel to the floor, and then it'll end perpendicular. I'll have some video of this where my controller starts parallel to the floor, and it gets almost perpendicular before I force myself to look at the ground in order to do a reset. Someone had once told me to lower the sensitivity to reduce this issue, but I found it drifted just as far, except I needed a larger hand movement in order to hold my Y-axis on screen. In both cases, this is not something that will have me turning off the motion controls in Monster Hunter Rise. It's more of an inconvenience and an annoyance. However, the bigger issue in my eyes is that it becomes harder to recommend motion controls to newer players that are trying to learn, at least my setup. The reason for this is actually fairly simple. Players aren't getting proper feedback because of the amount of resets never going down. They don't know when they're making mistakes with their control, or whether it's just the game forcing them into a reset. And without this proper feedback, it slows down the progress, and this is progress in something that already feels so foreign. At this point, I would suggest players that are learning motion controls to have them only turned on while they're aiming either the wire bug or the ranged weapons, unless of course they are experienced. Although at the same time, I've had one of my Splatoon teammates tell me that they're turning off the motion controls because the amount of resets just aren't worthwhile and the drift is just too much. Which leaves Monster Hunter Rise in kind of an awkward position. On one hand, it's an amazing implementation of motion controls. But on the other hand, players that would use motion controls and like motion controls are turning them off due to the abundance of issues. If they can fix these issues and possibly add the extra option, I would be quite confident in saying that Monster Hunter Rise has the best implementation of motion aiming on the Nintendo Switch. Again, beating out Splatoon 2. It's so close right now, and I really just hope that Capcom and the Monster Hunter team can see this through to the end. If you enjoyed this video, I invite you to leave a like and maybe even subscribe. Feel free to join our Discord through the link in the description. We have a great community of players on there that has a lot of great chat and plays together quite often. And until next time, show your pal and mute a little bit of appreciation for me and have a great day.